If you're strapped for time and you want to play fluidly all over the guitar neck, the simple method I'll show you today may be just the ticket. And it works for real music, both rhythm and lead. When I was a kid, I had nothing but time. Time for baseball, listening to records, and time for playing guitar. I would sit in front of the TV, watching MTV, and play along to all the videos the best I could, improvising lines. That's how I learned all my scales all over the neck in all different keys. But I had something then that I don't have today. That's time, plenty of it. The way I learned isn't ideal because most people don't have that time. But today there are readily available tools and concepts that are supposed to save time, but sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. For example, take the cage system, which is great, but it's time-consuming and it's difficult for many people. It's usually taught as a system of scales. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems to be a lot of information to take in all at once. And so it's usually taught position by position. But that just makes me want to stay in a single position and hang out, not move across the neck. But one great idea to simplify it is to just look at the caged chord shapes themselves. And that does simplify things, but not completely, as the chord shapes overlap. And several of them are difficult to play, especially with the stiff fingers most of us get as we age. But there is an easier way. It's simple and it's easier to play too. And the beauty is that you get to those complex patterns, but you do it in stages. And all along the way, you're using it to make music, which is way more fun. You probably know about it already. It's called Triads. And it turns this and this into this. I'm sure that looks a lot simpler to you because it is. There's only 3 shapes to remember. Here's how it works. You take a major or minor chord, and then you take the notes of that chord and you map them onto a set of 3 strings. Let's do an example in depth of a G chord mapped onto the strings G, B, and E. Here's a standard G chord, a G cowboy chord or open chord, whatever you want to call it. Now let's look at the notes in that chord. See how the only notes are G, B, and D? Only 3 notes. That is not an accident, and it'll happen for every major and minor chord. Now find a G note on the E string and fill in a D and a B on the B and G strings. And that's our first shape. Note where the G is because that'll help us navigate around the fretboard, knowing where that root is. Now we do the same thing for the other 2 strings, the B string and the G string. Here's a G on the B string, and now the B and D on the other 2 strings. That's the second shape to remember. Now let's do the shape with the G on the G string. So here's a G on the G string, and filling in the D and the B on the other 2 strings, we get this. That's our third shape to remember. So now you know 3 places that you can play a G all across the fretboard, but this works for any major chord. So in effect, you know 3 places to play any major chord. For example, for an A, we would take one of our G shapes like this one, and take that G and just move it 2 frets toward the bridge of the guitar, and now we've got our A, same shape. Or we could take this G shape, and again, there's our G, we can move that up 2 frets to the A. So you see, that's yet another advantage of doing this. You're actually learning the notes of the fretboard too, not just playing patterns. But the biggest advantage of this is that you can use it to play music all over the neck immediately. Let's take Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding. The basic chords are G, B, C, and A. But it gets boring playing open chords over and over. But check out how just using those 3 shapes that we learned today gets you all over the neck. And believe me, it's a lot more fun too. want more on how you can use triads to make real music, sign up to be notified for my new course on triads for R&B, rock, and the blues. It's going to be released soon with a bunch of free bonuses. So if you'd like that, go ahead and sign up. The link is in the description below. It's totally free. There's no obligation whatsoever. We'll see you on down the road.